And let's go ahead and get started. Let's see. Okay, we are being recorded. Hello and welcome to the National Council for Preservation Education Summer Series on Zoom. I'm Julee Johnson, the director of the National Council's Internship Program, and I moderate these presentations. In addition to today's session about how to get hired, the next presentation, which is Brown Bag Talks, is scheduled for 3 weeks from today, Thursday, July 31st, also 3 o'clock Eastern. A notice about that event will be distributed soon, so please watch for it in your inbox. Thank you for joining me today. I'm delighted you're all here, and I look forward to any questions or comments you might have, which you are invited to put into the chat at any time. If you weren't able to attend NCPE's meet and greet held 2 weeks ago, also on Zoom, I'm considering having another one in August based upon some feedback I got. So a date and time will be announced for that. At the June meet and greet, I asked participants there to come up with one thing they thought they should do to find their ideal job or how they would get that job. So if you have any thoughts about that, please let us know in the chat. So we're crowdsourcing action steps here. So before I introduce today's speaker, I want to share with you some of the resources that may help you in your academic and work careers. In case you're not aware, the National Council for Preservation Education, NCPE, is a nonprofit national membership organization formed by a coalition of faculty from colleges, universities, and trade schools with programs in historic preservation and heritage conservation. They offer degrees or certificates at the 2-year, 4-year, and graduate levels. Its membership consists of 62 schools located in 32 states with 10 different program types and 9 study abroad options. I mention all this because while you certainly know about NCPE's internship program, you may not be aware of its other programs. And I'll mention 3 that may interest and benefit you. Sometimes the best job is to go to school. So for over 45 years, in a variety of formats, NCPE has published its Guide to Academic Programs in Historic Preservation. This is a one-stop shop for anyone interested in a degree or certificate in the field. The guide can now be found online. Previously, it was in print, and it can be found now at ncpe.us under prospective students. And it can be searched by areas of study within the field. So if the building trades or crafts are of interest to you, you can find a program with that emphasis, or policy and law, or archaeology, community planning and outreach, museums, et cetera, et cetera. There are in-person, remote, and study abroad options, certificates and degrees, as I said, and there's probably a program that's right for you if you want to go down that avenue. In addition to the Guide to Academic Programs, of course, most of you are probably familiar with PreserveNet, NCPE's other website, in addition to ncpe.us. PreserveNet.org is where NCPE lists its internship opportunities, but that's just a small portion of a very active jobs board. There are currently 43 open positions listed on the jobs board right now, from full-time to part-time, including internships, fellowships, and temporary gigs. And this is midsummer, which has not in the past been a peak time for recruitment. Listing a job is free, which may be why it's a popular venue for job posts, but all the jobs must include a salary or salary range in order to be published. I suggest that all interns bookmark PreserveNet for the jobs board if you're looking in the future or even now. Lastly, one of NCPE's goals is to facilitate the exchange of preservation-related information and ideas, which it does by publishing the annual peer review journal called Preservation Education and Research, PER. and giving awards, offering grants, hosting conferences. I mentioned this because NCPE's annual conference this year is held on September 19th in Milwaukee, and it includes a session for student posters. The content of the posters can be one of a wide variety of topics, from technological innovation to global perspectives, ethical concerns, economic issues, a whole range of things. The deadline to submit an abstract is August 6th. So if you're looking to burnish your CV, this opportunity is available to you. As an added benefit, if your abstract is selected, there's a $500 scholarship awarded with that. And on to our featured speaker. I first met Andy Roblee when he was a student at my alma mater, Cornell University's graduate program in historic preservation planning. Before entering Cornell, he received his BA in history from Wells College and worked in the construction trades for 10 years. He has since founded Roblee Historic Preservation, LLC, a consultancy with dozens of projects to its name, and he meets the qualifications for Secretary of the Interior's standards for architecture and historic preservation. I will let Andy tell us more about his work and life experiences. If you have questions for him, please put them in the chat. I'll make sure we get to them before we conclude his presentation and say goodbye. So, Andy, do you want to take it away? And if you want to unmute,
sure.
Take over. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. My name's Andrew Roblee, and I'm so happy to be here to talk to you all. I was just thinking as Julie was talking that when I founded my business, I kind of went from this place where, sure, I had to create a resume and worry about a job interview to get hired somewhere, but now I have to do it sometimes several times a month because I need to go from project to project. So I feel like I have now a lot of experience in this sort of thing. So let me put up my slides and we'll get started. Here we are. Okay. Okay. Here's my first slide. Now, my main concern is making sure that Julie does not regret asking me to do this. So we'll see. I have a lot of experience in having many jobs. You know, the Get Hired Game Plan from application to offer, that's an interesting title. Because in some ways I think I might not be the best person to do this, right? Because I've had so many jobs. But maybe that's why I'm the best person, because I have had so many jobs. I've had some terrible jobs. I've gone about the interview in resume and in job world in the wrong way so many times that I've learned what not to do, which sometimes is more important than learning what to do, especially if you're like me. We'll talk a little bit about dream jobs, resumes, in interviews, why resumes and interviews are terrible and you can make them better, hopefully. And then we'll wrap this thing up. So let's move on. My career, and this is all set up to kind of illustrate why I have all this experience. My journey's not been a straight line, hasn't been typical or what some people might think of as ideal. So I think a lot of people, at least me, I'll speak for myself, I had this idea in my head of the trajectory of the average person's life where they go to high school, they graduate, then they go to undergrad, then they go to grad school, then they get a job, then they, I don't know, get married, retire, and die. And that is the perfect life, right? For an American. And I think that ideal has changed a lot in the last 10 or 15 years. But I don't think it was as common as we maybe assume it was, or at least I assumed it was. Um, my career has been more like this shoots and ladders game, right? So uh, I went to high school and then immediately started working after high school. I had other plans. I ended up going to undergrad and changed my major several times, so it took me longer than the average person to graduate with my bachelor's. Um, and I bounced between. Uh, I went to community college first. I transferred to a state school. I left. Then I went back to a private school and eventually graduated. Then I went back to work for several years until I ended up going to grad school. So I bounced around a little bit. And the other thing I want to add is that most of the jobs that I've gotten, and this is probably not, this is again why it might be bad for me to do this presentation. A lot of the jobs I've gotten have been because I knew somebody, not because I had a perfect resume or interview. Um, I was either hired as a favor, I was the closest person nearby that had a pulse, but sometimes it was because somebody was working somewhere or knew of a place that needed somebody just like me. And in my recent life, this is where my alumni network has come in handy. So one of the things I would suggest is get to know your alumni network from the program that you're in, because they can be the key to everything. They can be the key to making those connections that get you a job. And mentioning people's names is kind of seems outdated, but still works very well when it comes to getting into those job networks. Um, as I said, my career's been a little bit of a jumble. I want to share a couple of terrible experiences with you just to kind of set the stage. And maybe some of you have been through things like this, so we'll be able to relate a little bit. Um, the jobs I took just to pay the bills were always the worst. That's one thing I want to stress. Um, I I have gone through the nightmare of working for a temp agency, um, who have sent me to some really interesting places of work. So I remember one time in particular, I was living in Binghamton, and I got I got a job cleaning ovens at SUNY Binghamton, and I was about 20 or 21 years old. Um, and so I showed up the first day, and they handed me the oven cleaner and a piece of steel wool, and instructed me on how to clean the oven. I basically had to climb inside, and this was like not a fun job at all. And so I was working, working, trying to clean these ovens, and I didn't seem to be able to do it. So that was demoralizing. And then I would look outside and see kids my age walking by on their way to class, and it, it was kind of a low point. And so about 2 hours into that job, I just walked away. Never spoke to anybody. I just walked off. Another time they sent me to, I got an interview at a telemarketing agency. So this was kind of, to my mind, at 20 years old, like a more high quality job. So I got my dress shirt on, put a tie on, and walked about 3 miles in my dress shoes to get to this interview. Went through the whole interview, and it was fine. And then the last question he asked was, "Why do you want to work here?" And for some reason, I just was honest, and I said, I don't, I just need to pay my bills. I don't know why anybody would want to work at a telemarketing agency. And I could see, his face completely change, and I knew I wasn't going to get hired there. So um, that was that was an example of what not to do. So I've learned a lot of things the hard way, made a lot of dumb mistakes. But um, eventually, I ended up getting a job in construction and found kind of a place there. And so that helped me grow my interest in the trades. And then eventually, when I went back to school, I got my degree in history. and ended up working at a museum for a few years. I worked at the Seward House Museum in Auburn, New York, which is a National Historic Landmark. It's the home of William H. Seward, who was a Secretary of State under Abraham Lincoln. And it was really the kind of marriage of those two worlds, construction and history, that brought me into preservation. And from there, I found the preservation program at Cornell and decided to continue my learning. After that, I went to work for a engineering company doing cultural management, cultural resource management. And after 4 or 5 years, I left and founded my own firm. And that's where I am today. So let's move on. Your dream job. What does this mean? What is a dream job? I'm not really sure. I thought about this for a while, and I thought it might be interesting to talk about what we think dream jobs are. And what do we mean when we talk about our dream job? The funny thing about historic preservation is that I didn't really know it was my dream job until I got into it. I told you a little bit about my history. You know, before I got into the museum world, I thought I wanted to be a history professor at a community college, or maybe a wealthy musician. Maybe that was what I was supposed to be. Neither of those things happened. I don't think I was well suited to those worlds. I think sometimes your dream job changes, and so it's good to be aware of that and open to that, because you might go for your dream job and wind up getting it, and then you show up and you're in a meeting like this and you realize that somebody has 3 arms. Then what do? You realize things weren't cracked up. They weren't they didn't turn out the way you thought they would, so to speak. And there's kind of this thing that happens when you achieve a goal and it's not everything that you thought it would be. And that's okay. And we can learn from that and move on from that. And everything that we go through, I believe this, can lead us toward a really meaningful and fulfilling end, as long as we're open to that. So sometimes a job is part of your journey and not your final destination. So keep that in mind. Resumes are terrible. They suck. They're a little bit of a blunt instrument. You know, we hand in these rote pieces of paper with what we think is all the information that is supposed to be on it, and that becomes part of this undifferentiated pile on someone's desk or in their email inbox. And it's really a chore for people to read to read resumes, the person who's hiring you. So, you know, I think back in the day when I was doing my resumes, what I would do is try not to stand out. I wanted to make my resume look like I thought a resume was supposed to look, kind of like everybody else's. I thought maybe if I stood out, then that would be a red flag to somebody as a problem. And so I didn't do anything interesting, and I didn't take any chances. And I think that's, in the instances when I have done that, it's worked out better. So I do have a few bullets here of some things that I do nowadays to try and make mine stand out. And as I told you, I have to send out my resume, 10 to 12 times a year, trying to get different projects for my business. One of the things that I do is I include a photo on my resume. This is becoming slowly, increasingly popular nowadays, but back when I was in my teens and 20s and even my early 30s, this was a no-go. I think if I would have suggested this to myself then, I'd say that's insane. People are going to think you're crazy or narcissistic or something, but I don't think that's true. you should tailor your resume for each job you're looking for. So that's something that I do now. If I'm trying to get a project for, let's say, a National Register district in the state of Maryland, well, I need to tailor that to speak to that job and what it is requiring. Um, and I think if you're looking for a job, even if it's at a company to fill a position, you should do the same thing because different companies are going to be looking for slightly different things. They all have different um, cultures, right? So look at the company that you're applying to and try and get a sense of what it is they're looking for. You also want to add context to your work experience, right? So don't just make a bulleted list of all the things that you've done. Um, put it into perspective. So let's say you go for a job, and this goes for the interview too, but your resume is also involved in this. You don't get the job, and then you ask for feedback, and they say, "Oh, we were looking for somebody with a little bit more experience in Excel or something." Um, and you smack your head, and you're like, "Oh, I should have told them about how I did this one project at school using Excel, and it solved a lot of problems for us," or something like that. That's just an example off the top of my head, right? Well, now you know for next time to put that on there. So that's the type of thing that you want to embellish. And I'm going to show you my resume. Okay. So this is kind of my generic resume here. And you'll see that it's constrained mostly to 2 pages. It can go on, but that's only because I'm old and I've done a lot of things. I usually have a page for references as well. Um, but you'll see I have my picture here, which is getting to be about 13 or 14 years old and needs to be replaced. Um, but it's a nice picture, so I include it there. I have my name and my title, and then my bio. And this can be edited to be as brief or as long as it needs to be. You've got my project experience there in different types of work. This is the generic one that I have going on. Now, when I have this, what I can do then is if I'm going for something specific, I take this, make a copy, and then I can start pulling stuff out and tailoring it. I'll give you an example of that. So I mentioned historic district in Maryland. Let's say I want to get that contract. So I've still got my photo and my little heading here. What I've done though is I've referenced another document. So if they see this abridged version, and they have an interest and they want to see a little bit more, I've extended the invitation to request that from me. So they can have that if they want to ask. You can see some of the context that I put under each of these headings, each of the projects that I've done. So the Ezra A. Huntington House in Auburn, for example, just a couple sentences that describe what I did specifically. In this should be relevant to the project I'm trying to get or the job I'm trying to get. Like saying that you know, play Fortnite all the time is not something that they care about really, unless you're trying to get a job at Fortnite, right? So I'm trying to get a job doing a historic district, so they are going to want to know all the National Register nominations that I've worked on. And then, of course, just to increase that relevance there, I want to make sure that they know that I've worked in Maryland. I've worked, you know, because each of the SHPOs is different, so you want to make sure that they know you've dealt with that before. And that has an impact on any of the resumes that you guys are putting together. So those are my suggestions for your resume. Um, I'll move on. Interviews. Interviews can be really brutal. At least that's my experience. They're either wonderful and I get the job, or they are really inexperienced. So I thought an appropriate slide would be the worst clip art I could find of interviews. Just two faceless people saying nothing to each other. That can be what an interview can feel like. But I think an interesting thing to remember is that the interviewer is going through this too with you. They're scared or bored or annoyed, just like you are. It's kind of a pain to find a new hire. A lot of people view it that way. It's much easier to keep somebody than to find somebody new. Um, so the more interesting we can make it for the interviewer, I think the better, obviously the better impression that we'll have, but actually the more we might be able to learn from those people. Um, Here's a great cartoon. So you finish your resume and you're going to the interview, and then you sit down in the interview and they start to ask you these really weird questions, like some of these here, or um, questions like, please describe the ideal job for you following graduation. Or would you say that you could easily deal with high pressure situations? Or are you the type of student for whom conducting independent research has been a positive experience? These are all real interview questions. Um, Really, all it tells me is that I might have to deal with a high pressure situation or a difficult person at this job. This interviewer has telegraphed to me that that's what's going to happen. Um, and that's fine. I mean, a lot of these people maybe just looked up these questions before you even showed up, just to ask them. I think a good interviewer um, is going to get right to the point. Okay. They're not going to ask you about your favorite Halloween costume. It's not relevant. It's kind of a really cringy way to try and be relevant um, with the person you're interviewing, trying to make it light. Um, and I don't like that kind of thing. I don't do that. Um, so just more on interviews. At best, I think if they're asking you rote questions and looking for rote answers, that's a warning sign to me. And I know you might be thinking, well, that's all fine, but I need a job to pay my bills and all that stuff. But I would really consider within yourself if if you're applying for a job that is looking for a standard resume and rote answers to rote questions in an interview, if that's the kind of place you want to work. And I think I've definitely taken jobs just out of that anxiety of needing a job where the interview and resume process was like that. But I think those always turn out poorly for both for me and for the employer, right? Um, Good interviewers, like I said, they'll get right to the point and ask you about the thing you will actually be doing for the company. They're not going to give you a personality test. I really don't like those either. Those are insane to me that some places still do that. Um, I think we're all smart or maybe dumb enough to answer these questions in a perfunctory and performative manner to check the boxes that the interviewer is looking to check. Um, but I've gone on that long enough. I want to talk about how to make the interview better for everybody involved. Be a good listener. So you go to an interview and you often think it's all about what your answers are going to be. Like I got to give the right answer or I'm not going to get this job. But I think it shows more if we're good listeners. So asking good questions. And what is a good question? A good question is something that another person can answer easily. A yes or no question. People like to answer easy questions, right? That seems like an obvious thing to say, but thinking about it, um, listening to them say something and then asking good questions like, oh, wow, what year did that happen? And wow, was that really weird? Or, all the sorts of things humans ask one another when they're actively listening. Um, it's good to repeat back the last few words of the interviewer's question. That lets them know you're listening. Don't do it too much, though. This is just like saying the interviewer's name. Um, this goes back to, I don't know, was it Dale Carnegie or something? Saying people's name makes them happy. It's like this weird psychological fact. I would say that if you do it too much, though, it weirds them out. Um, I had a long time ago, I had a door-to-door salesman come to my apartment, and this was the late 90s, and I still couldn't believe that door-to-door salesman existed. But he came in, and I don't know what he was trying to sell, insurance or something like that, and he kept saying my name. Every single sentence, he was saying my name. Andy, what would you say your needs are for insurance right now? Oh, that's interesting, Andy. Now, Andy, tell me, what do you think you'd be able to afford? And so, yeah, the 15th time he said my name, I was like, I got to get this guy out of my apartment. I'm scared. So just don't overdo it. Act like a human. And I'm not trying to be flip or funny, but I think when we go into these interview situations, we we're kind of wired to start to engage in like a theater where people are playing a specific role, and um, it's good to break out of that and just try and relax. Don't put your feet up on the table, but be relaxed and confident and just act like a human being, and you'll come across better. So, the old question of why do you want to work here? Um, that should be easy for you to answer, I think. Um, if you have to pause and think about it, or you're not prepared for that question when you walk in there, um, to not just to the interviewer's satisfaction, but to yours, I think you'll pay for it. So again, ans trying to come up with answers that will please the interviewer is the wrong tactic. Ask yourself if you really do want to work at that place, you know, um, and they're going to be able to tell if you're just telling them the answer they want to hear, or if you're telling the truth as well. I've watched enough YouTube true crime videos to know that when someone is lying, they take time to think about it, about their answer, or they start talking about minute details to buy time. Um, the detectives say that you don't have to remember the truth, right? So be ready, be relaxed, give the right answer, or don't just give the right answer to please your interviewer. I already said that. Um, oh, somebody's coming into the way. I'll admit them. Being honest will save everybody hassle and heartache in the long run. And then if you don't get the job, ask for feedback, just like I said. Um, so a lot of this was, I tried to offer you guys some tips and tricks, but this is more like stuff I wish somebody told me. This is the presentation that I needed back when I was coming into the world. Um, so I just want to say to wrap things up, um, let me just check my time here. Oh, yes. So now is the time to start acting like your life matters. And I say that not to try and give you any anxiety, but just to let you know that like everything that you do from this point on can be something that you can learn from. Be honest with yourself about what job you're going for. What are you trying to accomplish? Are you just trying to pay bills, or are you on a path? Is there something specific you want to accomplish? These are all things you should share with the person you're interviewing with and with yourself as you go out there. You want a job that you're going to be happy in and feel like you have some purpose and meaning. And I've had jobs where I was nameless. Um, you know, I sat behind, I sat at a desk and basically worked on spreadsheets when I thought I was going to be in cultural resources. Um, that being said, you should also be open to uncomfortability in the pursuit of something interesting and worthwhile, right? So we don't grow and we don't learn without going through those times of stress and uncomfortability. If we'll, if we're living our entire lives trying to avoid that, first of all, it's an impossible task. And second of all, we're missing out on learning and growing. And that learning and growing can only bring us closer to what it is we want to be doing with our lives. So um, that's all I have to say. I hope that wasn't too much of a mess. And I hope I gave enough practical advice along with some, I don't know, I wouldn't call it wisdom, but experience of what not to do and to be helpful. So I'm going to stop sharing and maybe we can move on to questions if anybody has any.
Yeah. I don't see, I put a few things in the chat. Oh, thank you, Shay. Uh, Wonderful advice. That's very lovely. And if there are any questions, that's great, or just comments, those are great too. One thing you mentioned your alumni network, Andy, but I do want to say and mention that there is a NCPE alumni, uh, not so much of a network, and it's not like a secret handshake like the Masons, but there are thousands of NCPE alumni, internship alumni, because the program's been around for 31 years. So I've actually met people who were in the first cohort in 1994 who are NCPE interns, who were in NCPE interns. Um, and uh, again, it's who you know in these kind of connections that you make. So I think that's always a positive thing to mention on a resume that you participated in a particular type of program, not just NCPE, but if you're ACE scholar or one of the other kinds of internship programs, that's helpful as well. And again, I guess making connection to people who may also have been part of that tribe, I guess is useful as well. Um, let's see if there are any questions. A secret handshake. It's a too Masonic, too weird. I think. And Allison asks, how should you ask for feedback after an interview if you don't get the job? What kind of feedback should you be asking for? And let me just say, it can be a little difficult considering how much time people don't have to respond to that, respond to it meaningfully. So I guess, Andy, if you were in that position and you really it was your dream job and you didn't get it, how would you do that so that it is not a burden to say, oh, let me count the ways why you didn't get this job?
Sure. I mean, first of all, hopefully they tell you that they haven't chosen you, first of all, because I'd say about half the time they just become ghosts and you never hear from them again, which is really sad. To your point, Julie, of
Yeah.
I guess how busy, which, I'm so tired of people talking about how busy they are, when that's not really what they mean. So I mean, if usually you get an email or something, if they're really nice people, they'll call you. I I don't think I've gotten a call because I've missed out on a project ever. It's almost always an email. But you can respond and just say, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. Can you offer me any feedback on what went into your decision? It could be as simple as that. And they may come back with something generic, or they may be very specific. And those are the instances where you can really learn something. So I go through this all the time. Like I said, it's it's quite analogous to looking for a job, whereas I'm trying to get projects all year. And when I don't get one, I always ask for feedback. And, you're charging too much, or, we decided to go in another direction because of X, Y, or Z reason. So, the type of feedback is kind of up to them because that's the thinking into why they made their decision. So I would just don't be afraid to reach out. And like, I wouldn't, I wouldn't worry about being a burden either. Like, You have to be assertive. Don't be afraid to be assertive. I think I'm somewhere between Gen X and a millennial. And, I think beginning with millennials and Gen Z, they're less inclined to be assertive. Maybe that's not a generational thing. Maybe that's an age thing. I probably was less likely to do that when I was younger too. But, you know, if you want to move forward and want to learn from this life, you have to be a little assertive. And it's just an email. They can ignore it. They can just ignore it. But usually people will reply and tell you.
All right, that's a very good point. You're right. It never hurts to ask. People can ignore you, but especially if you word it in such a way that
Yeah.
you're not like a stalker person, you know, you didn't give me this job. I'll stalk you
Well,
for.
yeah, don't write back and say, why don't you like me? Just say, well, let them know you appreciate it and you'd like the feedback for your future.
Mhm. Yeah, I've noticed this in a couple of instances where our supervisors for the NCPE internship program, they might interview 2 or 3 or 4 people for the one position. But once you go to the trouble, especially in this type of thing, where you actually interview someone and had a
Mhm.
really good conversation, their responses, the thank you for applying, but response becomes uh, more thorough and specific and can very often be very encouraging. I don't know if you've ever had, doesn't sound like it, Andy, that you've ever had a rejection that actually was very nice, very positive. But I've noticed that some of our supervisors are very encouraging, like apply again, I want to hire you, kind of thing.
The other thing I wanted to add, just going back to something you said, Julie, is in the context of this question. Um, you know, what if you don't get your dream job? I mean, this all goes back to, what is your definition of your dream job? Because to me, my dream job would want me there. So if you don't get it, that's a point where you stop and ask yourself, okay, maybe this wasn't meant to be. That dream job concept keeps changing as time goes on.
A very good point. I You mentioned about how to make an interview interesting, and I'm coming from a place where I was on a search committee for an executive director of a nonprofit historic preservation organization here in Ithaca, and it was interesting in the in-person interview. You know how some of these things always start out with Zoom Teams meeting, and then turn to in person, especially if they're from away. And our uh, our interviewee came with little presents to give to each of the members of the search committee. And I thought that went above and beyond. It wasn't food, which I appreciated that. I don't mind people offering me cookies or brownies or whatever, but it's a little bit too intimate. But he came from a place where he was working at a bookbindery, and he had made small notepads for each of us to give to the members of the search committee and to the staff that he would be interviewing with. And I thought, well, what a interesting idea. They were so unique and handmade and really, really lovely. I'm not suggesting that for anybody, but it is a interesting idea to say thank you. And if you're able to do it, I guess in a very personal way, um, is can be charming and memorable. So I'm going to remember you,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah, that's a really great example. You have to your point, you do have to kind of be able to try and read the room, so to speak, to know, if it makes sense. That's a great thing to do. But yeah, if you show up with, gift presence and you've never met these people before, it
Yeah.
will be weird.
Yeah,
There's a question here from Noni. When people ask for you to tell them about your background in an interview, how much should you refer back to the details specifically on your resume? I wouldn't refer back to anything specifically during that. Um, remember it's a conversation between two humans, so you're just going to say, well, if it were me, if they asked me about my background, I'd be like, well, I started off in the construction trades, and then I got a bachelor's in history. I got into the museum world, and I really found that working between those two worlds and learning about historic buildings was where I belonged. And so that's a really general outlay of my background. Um, in fact, if they're asking you about your background in that way, it might be a sign they haven't even looked at your resume until you walked in the room. So it's good to have that. It's good to have that. I would say a 5-minute pitch is too long. I'd make it 45 seconds or a minute like mine was. Um, if they want to ask you further questions, they can. Um, if they need to know further detail, they'll ask and you can just answer. And like I said, just answer honestly and you won't have to remember anything. You don't have to prepare anything. Just just be there, be present.
Mhm,
That might be terrible advice. I don't know, but that's what I do.
mhm.
And it seems to work.
Maybe it's the group of people, Andy, that I sometimes work with, or I see uh, NCPE for the internship program. We'll get over 1,000 applications, especially for this summer positions. And I do take a look at, I can't look at all of them. It's not my job, thankfully. And I do feel for people who have like 120 applications for a specific job because somebody has to sit and look through all of them. So, but I, I do notice with some that some younger people, I guess, maybe it depends on the level of experience I do, um, have listed their high school on their resume. And I wonder if you think maybe that depends on where you are applying for a job, if that has relevance for where, because you think, hey, maybe these people went to my high school too. And again, that point of connection. Or maybe they just don't have a lot of experience. So they don't want to put down that they worked for 6 months at, Forever 21 or something. I don't know. But do you think that's also can be relevant sometimes or irrelevant some other times?
Yeah, it can be. I mean, anything could be relevant for that matter. But I mean, if you haven't done anything except high school, that's all you can put on there. But you should, I don't think anybody here is in that boat.
Mhm.
Um, if it's relevant, put it on there. Like if you were president of the history club and you led a walking tour of your downtown or something like that, that's probably relevant to what it is you all are looking for. Um, but at some point I stopped I put my high school on resumes too and job applications for sure. At some point I stopped doing that, mostly just because I got too old, but also because I gained more experience. So it's one of those things like, you want to show that you have experience, but you're trying to get the job so that you can get experience. It's that old thing. So, make whatever experience you have relevant. That's the key.
Mhm. Good point.
Yeah, I hate to say like do this and don't do this because it's hard to put down any hard and fast rules. Like if you can make it relevant and make it make sense, it should go in there.
Very good point. Um, Absent any more questions, I'll just say one thing. I've been in an experience a couple of times where people are, and sometimes I've been applying for a job, and sometimes I've been on the search committee, interviewing in these both situations where people are asking questions about, it seems to be specific to the person who left, and let's say what kind of situation they what kind of mess they created, rather than talking to you about how you're going to benefit the organization. And it's always very clear, I find, in those situations that they had an employee who is either super duper and they want to replicate that, but they can't. So they want you to pretend that you are, or they were a disaster and they want to make sure that you don't, firebomb the building or something like that. And they ask their questions specifically, very specifically about that. So I I wonder if that is that just a terrible red flag and you want to run, like screaming from the room. Um,
I mean, that's how I would that's how I would view it. But in the moment, I probably would just ask more questions.
mm,
Um, so that's a way to kind of turn it so you don't feel like you're on the spot so much of trying to compare yourself to this person, but you know, say like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I would feel worse coming after the super duper person. I mean, that is a tough situation. Um, Going after the terrible person is a little bit better because, anything is better than what they had. But like I said, I would just ask more questions and be like, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Did that happen here? Or is that something that you deal with a lot? Or, try and get into it more because based on what you're telling me, Julie, it sounds like they wanted to talk about it more. And the more they talk about it, the better they're going to feel about you, in my experience.
mhm.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, I see what you mean. Uh, yeah, it can be difficult in that situation if you've got somebody who did things that were not, I guess, because I would think the organization is, let's say it's an organization, a company, whatever, is dwelling on something that happened in the past. They're not forward thinking. They're not looking for what you can provide and moving the company, the organization forward. They're all, and maybe this is like some traumatic thing that they went through.
Well, I mean, that's a good point because it could be a red flag, but it could be the opportunity for you to,
Yeah.
after you've asked those questions and got all that information, offer your vision for the future. And if they hadn't thought of that and what you said sounds good, then that sounds like a good interview to me.
Yeah.
Um, but if they're not ready to let go, then maybe that's not the best place to keep moving forward at.
Question from Vic. A lot of people have lately recommended to tailor resumes to a certain boring format to fit AI filters and have AI detect the keywords, especially when applying to bigger companies. In your experience, has that been as big of a concern? And how do you balance being interesting and getting through filters?
Mm.
Grim.
Wow, that's a great question. Um, God, I don't even know if I can answer this because I don't think I've ever had that experience. So this is a new thing. Like when I send my resume to get a project, it's always going to a person. Even when I subcontract from a larger company, I don't think I've either never worked with a company so large that they had to employ AI filters, or the corner of the company I'm working in just needs that level of control that they want to see who they're hiring. Um, to me, and this is just me, I probably wouldn't send my resume to a company that was using AI filters. Now, that's not good advice. I understand that. People need jobs and these massive corporations need employees, evidently. So, I, I- yeah, how do I balance being interesting and getting through the filters? I don't know. I probably would default to being more interesting, even if it meant not getting the job. But that's just me and my experience telling me that that's the type of job I want to have. That's my dream job, part of my dream job.
Yeah, good point. Um, as we wrap up, I just want to remind NCPE interns that if you complete 640 hours or more and are interested as a NCPE intern, you are eligible to get a PLC certificate, Public Land Corps Act Non-Competitive Hiring Authority. Not that anybody wants a federal job these days, but just in case you want to work for the federal government, that PLC certificate will allow you to apply for jobs as if you're an existing federal employee, and there are more positions that are open to you, as opposed to someone coming in and having no experience with the federal government. It just puts you in an advantageous position, and all NCPE interns are working on eligible projects, conservation projects. And you should, I think, pretty much all meet the eligibility requirements of being 30 years old or younger, or 35 if you're a veteran. 640 hours is the minimum number of hours. If that's something that you're interested in pursuing, I can give you the worksheet that you fill out, and you complete that and you submit it for your certificate. And you use that when you apply for a federal position through usajobs.gov. Speaking of usajobs.gov, that's normally where I would recommend that people go for federal employment. That was kind of in the before times, because now they're looking for people to work for the Bureau of Prisons. But that's not to say that there aren't jobs available or won't be at some point. And in the past, USA Jobs had very good workshops on resume writing, especially if you want to get through the sort of federal process, interviewing techniques and that kind of thing. So I do want to just mention that. Lastly, I think,
Julie,
yeah.
Victoria had
Oh,
added a question.
how long? That's a very good question. From the 2 years from the date of your last day as an employee, as a NCPE intern. So whatever that, it's good for 2 years. So it's not good indefinitely. And maybe it's just something that you get because all you really have to do is fill out a worksheet and get your supervisor to sign it and say some nice things about you. And maybe you don't use it, but maybe you say on your resume that you have it for some other position. And again, it's another certification that demonstrates your excellency in the field. So I can certainly provide you with more information about that. And I think that's good. I just want to one last thing before we close. This is a call out for anyone interested in presenting their internship experiences at the Brown Bag Talks on July 31st. If you want to share your good work that you're doing in about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes during these presentations, especially if you think it would be especially informative or broadly appealing, please let me know. And I will be sending out a brief survey to participants today, so you'll see that in your inbox. Thank you very much for showing up and participating. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much to Andy for sharing all of his experiences, good and bad. And we'll see you later.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.
Good
Bye-bye.
luck, everyone.